59. I am
Like
ready.
me and
Okay,
and
and
that was
if
Jimmy's
you
like,
want me to hand anything
Jimmy's
else,
like,
I'll let you know.
that's all his voice was.
well,
His mother
thank you all for attending the Living in the Avon's Hill Conference. Just a few reminders about today. After the session, we will be having lunch, which can be picked up in the exhibit hall or founder's room, where refreshments have been served. So if you had coffee and donuts earlier this morning, it's in that same room. Please have your lunch ticket available. Lunch seating is available in the Great Hall where you registered this morning. Please, also please note the conference evaluation on white paper in your folder. Please fill it out throughout the day and return it to the registration table before you leave. Now I'd like to introduce you to Knudsen Klodzny. Klodzny. I knew I was going to screw it up. I'm sorry. Jim Knudsen Klodzny. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm going to hang out close by.
So, bonjour. Well, before we get to that, living in the Avon Hills, a conference for the whole family. How about that? Mille, Sota, Makoce, the Dakota Homelands. I'm Jim Knudsen Klodzny. My main job is the director of the American Indian Center, St. Cloud State. So we're going to learn a little bit. In an hour, you can't learn much about everything you need to know. So it's going to be like an introduction, an overview. And then there's a test that you'll do in the hour with people next to you on how much you actually know. So learn about and integrate Dakota values for caring for the land and consider your individual family and community connections by examining and you can read. So let me see if this works. Yes, bonjour, Anishinaabe and Dao. And all I said was hello, I am Anishinaabe. So I'm an enrolled member of the Ottawa Nation from Manistee, Michigan. My grandfather was a member of the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians. And so it's traditional in our culture to talk about where we come from. My first job after grad school was at the Shakpe Indian Reservation here in Minnesota, and that's the first thing I wanted to know. Where are you from? You don't care what your name is, where you're from, because if I know your community, if I know what part of the country you're from, I know all about you. Oh, so you're from Edina? I know those people in Edina. You know how they act and how they behave and how they treat the land and how they treat each other. And so that's the thing, is I panicked. I didn't know where I was from. My mom is from Michigan. She was born in Michigan. She was speaking Ottawa as a young child. She went through the boarding school experience and ended up on the Bad River Indian Reservation in the Catholic boarding school. We called those the death camps, the genocide, cultural genocide. She left that boarding school in the 6th grade only speaking English. Her hair was cut. And if you heard of the boarding school experience, it was a time frame where a lot of things happened. It was a long frame of time of our history, where in the beginning it was kill the Indian, save the child. In the end, it was vocational education. I know elders off the Lower Sioux Reservation who said, hey, we got meals every day, we got lodging, we got an education, we got a skill. The boarding school experience for some of the elders was excellent, while the boarding school for other people were not so good. And so it was a period of our time where they tore apart families. So there's different things. And so my mom was Sarah Marsh. She became Sarah Schilke. She became Sarah Klodzny. I became Jim Klodzny about 66 years ago. And then 25 years ago, I became Jim Knudsen Klodzny. So I'm always evolving, and our name has changed. Klodzny is a Russian name. My grandfather on my dad's side came from Russia in 1917. My parents and grandparents on my mom's side has been here since the beginning of time, according to their values. And so I have a wife and children, and so it is customary to talk about where we're from and mention our family. And I was raised white German Catholic in Jefferson, Wisconsin. I'm taking pills for that. So anyway, and it's important to realize about being raised white German Catholic. In Jefferson is Gemütlichkeit days. We were the only family of color in Jefferson. So in the 50s and 60s, I was growing up, and 1964 Civil Rights Act, Kennedy, and his big movement, and his assassination, the Vietnam War, all those things. And so it was an interesting time to grow up. So we're going to talk about that. I would come home from school, and I'd say, Mom, they're teasing us again. They're calling us brownie and spick and all kinds of names, Mexican and all that stuff. And she goes home. Because of her boarding school experience, she didn't raise us in the culture. She didn't want us to be raised as Indians. She goes, we're white. I said, I know we're white, but we're just a little darker white than everybody else. I'm getting crap for that. And so it's interesting. All my life I've been moved, not Indian enough, not brown enough, not white enough, so stuck in the middle, and I don't mind. It's a nice role. So we'll get back to some of that. There's my tribal ID. We're the only people in this nation who are their own nation and have to carry ID cards to prove who we are. Blood quantum, my children cannot get any of the things that come from our treaty of 1836 with the U.S. government, the Ottawa Treaty, and so I'm the last of my family line that's enrolled in a tribe. My children have Indian heritage, are descendants, but nothing for the treaties anyway. And that can change because of the power of sovereignty. It's what the tribe decides. The latest example was White Earth changed theirs, and they threw out Irma Visner really fast when she did that. So there's a lot of controversy on it. So I thought I was presenting in front of teachers, so I threw this slide in. But this works for anybody. What can non-Indian teachers in diverse settings do to teach Indian children? What can anybody, the general public, or anybody learn about Indians, to interact with them, to teach there, or to do business with them? And it's two approaches. The macro approach, which is the huge one, and the micro approach. So what happened to Turtle Island? What happened when this place was invaded and became the United States? What happened right here in Minnesota? Where do you guys live? Whose land do you live on? And what's the history behind that? So if teachers are going to teach about the Indian experience, the Indian nations, and how they were set up and recognized, and teach about treaties and sovereignty, we have to include that big picture. And then if you're going to work with somebody in your backyard, what's their story? And just like, what's your story? Where did you come from? Where did your ancestors come from? What's your immigration story? Or how long have you been here? And so anyway, my Dakota colleagues, since I'm Anishinaabe from Michigan, they remind me this is Dakota land. It always has been for a long, long time. And so I work with Dr. Darlene St. Clair. We do teacher training during the summer in Minnesota on an Indian reservation. Lower Sioux is her reservation, and it's a place where they paint the town, or the place where they paint the trees red. That was a slip. Oh gosh, she'll kill me. A place where they paint the trees red. And it's with her permission I get to use her slides, because I'm telling teachers about the Dakota value training of land use, and it's usually sociology teachers, 6th grade teachers, it's history teachers, and this is her, she's representing this non-profit group, the Dakota, and they wrote curriculum for 6th grade teachers all across Minnesota to put Dakota land values into their curriculum. So Dakota Homeland, all of Minnesota, half of Wisconsin, all of North Dakota, all of South Dakota, Iowa, Illinois, Canada, they go all over the place. It was a group of people, and this is before borders, used to travel everywhere. They moved with the seasons. They weren't just like locked in one place. They returned. And so you have to understand that, their values, their life, their family, and what they all did. My people, the Great Migration, we moved here. We walked here. We were on Turtle Island, And we started way up here in Newfoundland. And they teach this in school districts, and sometimes it's really nice to see that they teach about the Great Migration. The Dakota people have been here for 10,000 years or more. You talk to the elders and they talk about this land, and they talk about it before the Ice Age, and when the ice melted, they came back. And so that was the thing, is that they've been here a long, long time. Us latecomers or interlopers, we came 2,000 years ago. So my people have been here for 2,000 years. It took us 900 years to walk from here, and we settled along the way until we got here to Minnesota. And the legend shows, or tells, or that we teach our children, is that the vision told us to go until we find food that grows on the water. And what is that food? Do you know? Wild rice. What's the Ojibwe word? Minomen. Yes, and there's a town, Minomen, up on the White Earth Reservation. And so anyway, and that island right here, where's that island up there? It's not Madman. Is it Madman? Yeah, that's really a sacred spot. There's a lot of sacred spots all over Turtle Island that would, Bear Butte, the Black Hills, Madman Island, hold a lot of significance to Indian people. But anyway, that's a long walk. There's no road, so it took us a long time to get here. But it's good that you see that we're here, and there's the source for that. So you have to talk about currently, where a lot of teachers believe, or a lot of students and maybe general public believe we're gone, we're not here anymore. Oh, really? I thought we beat you, and you guys aren't. There's nothing left of you. So you have to look at the effects of colonization to kind of like understand what happened to the culture, what happened to the people. So how much, we got another group of people coming in, and they were outnumbered in the beginning. Remember, the colonists weren't that as populated as the American Indians were here, and then the balance of power shifted. The first treaties said our red brothers. The last treaty said our red children. So you can see how resources, numbers of people, wealth, materials, weapons, everything, the balance of power shifted. And so believing something for 10,000 years and how you interact with the land, and then having somebody come in and colonize you and say you're doing that wrong, you're living wrong, you're teaching your children wrong, what's this food, we don't understand this corn, let's burn it all down. Things like that. It's like a clash of culture and values. They're not the same, but these people came in power, so our beliefs, values, and customs were not right. You can't be civilized, you're not Christian. Yeah. And so that was kind of interesting. We resisted assimilation, but it happens. Over the years, if you look at the last 400 years, you can see different levels and different pockets of assimilation and acculturation, the federal policies, the boarding school, and it's generational. So we still have children today suffering from the boarding school experience even though they've never been in it. Their relatives, their grandparents, their great-grandparents. And so we had a student at St. Cloud State in the nursing program, our best student, 4 point always. She called me in tears saying that she's going home, she's quitting. I go, oh, no. And it was because they brought the boarding school experience up in one of her classes. The instructor doing, his nice job and talking all about it and moving on. Now the next topic, let's talk about this. Well, she's locked in that topic, and all the experiences came up, the hardships, what happened to her family. And so she's silently weeping, and she thinks everybody in the room likes it, or is looking at her, and they've moved on already. They're on the next thing in history. And she calls me and says, well, I'm leaving, I'm quitting, I'm going home. And so we resolved the problem, but it's generational. It keeps coming back, and they still have to, apply it. So to understand Indians today and their values, you have to understand what happened between these two groups. What happened to my people as Ottawas, what happened to, the Dakota, the Navajo, the Abenaki. You have to understand what happened to all Indians. And so these are laws applied to American Indians. There was a time period, and you don't have to become an expert in it, but you just have to realize that there are two governments, two nations, well, 864 nations dealing with the U.S. government. The tribal leader at my reservation meets one-on-one with President Trump. I don't know if they want to or not, but that's, no matter who's in that office, it's the president of my tribe meeting with the president of the United States. And that's how they work out the deals, just like any other thing. So we're the only nation in a nation. And so it's through the recognition of sovereignty. So these are all the things that happened: the removal and relocation, Trail of Tears. Almost every tribe had been relocated or had their own Trail of Tears. You hear mostly in schools about the Cherokee and the Choctaw. This happened just recently in Minnesota with the Boyce Fort. When they discovered gold up there, they moved them all off the reservation. When they couldn't find the gold, they moved them back. So, well, never mind, you can have the place back. And so allotment and assimilation. The Dawes Act said everybody's going to be farmers. And so they cut up the reservation in little land pieces and then expected Indians to be farmers, settle down, do this. Well, they had more land left over than they had people. So the federal government took back again that land and sold it to non-natives. So I have Indian students at St. Cloud State saying, I'm going home to the cabin. I said, where do you live? Oh, Leech Lake Reservation. Oh, really? And they go, yeah, my grandfather bought it a long time ago. We've been living on the Leech Lake Reservation legally for all these years because we bought it, or my ancestors bought it. But if you bought it from him and he bought it from her, she bought it from her and you stole it. They go all the way back and go, hey. And they go, oh, forget about it. That's 200, 300 years ago. Well, Indian people don't forget because we're still living, we're still living out what happened and the ripple effect. So allotment, assimilation, reorganization, and self-government. So you can see the U.S. government flip-flopping back and forth on how we should deal with the Indian problem and Indian nations, where they terminated all the tribes. My tribe was terminated, and it took us 40 years to get re-recognized by the U.S. government. And it wasn't until President Clinton came into office, and in 1994, that was his term, we went in front of Clinton and got reorganized, or re-recognized. They call it reaffirmed. And so we got our treaty back, our borders back, everything. They go, okay, you're Indians again now. Before we weren't. And so it's interesting in this time frame. And so now we have self-determination. I think it was in the 80s maybe? I'm not good on Trump history, but he was opening up a casino in New Jersey. And it went belly up or it didn't work. And he was really attacking the Indians on their sovereignty. And so you have to understand what sovereignty is and why we have that. And so that's the thing, is that fast forward to today, and since they can't make treaties anymore, they have a thing called president executive orders. And you just make up something, just like the no-fly zone to certain countries. So he can terminate the tribes. There's one person in power. Who knew a long time ago he was gonna, try his thing at gambling and didn't work, and he's attacking the Indian people and their sovereignty and their treaties and their membership on who they are. And now he has the power to do stuff. So Indian people all across the nation are waiting for another shoe to drop. What's he gonna do next? As well as maybe the whole nation, I don't know. So if you think about the laws, in Minnesota, they had a conflict in 1862, 1863. Well, it started, I think, in 1862. The Dakota conflict, some call it the Dakota Wars, massacre, depending on what side you're on and what perspective you take. Well, in 1863, they passed a law that no Dakota can ever live here. That law is still current. This is a letter that was sent by President Dayton to President Obama saying that law is still on the books. Can we get rid of it? It's kind of embarrassing. And Indian people, it annoys them, well, the Dakota people, going, we've lived here for 10,000 years, and then we more or less got pushed around a lot, and we agreed to go on to reservations. It's not the federal government gave us reservations, we agreed to go there. We will live on this plot of land so everybody else in the room has a place to live. So we moved ourselves there, and then they told us we can't leave. I think not until 1945 we were allowed to leave without permission. We always had to have permission. But in 1863, they said, none no Dakotas can live here. And the law is still here. Obama sent it back saying we can't change the law. It takes a lot to go change the law. You gotta go to committee, you gotta have all these things, and we have to tear apart that law. And 2 reservations in Nebraska were set up with that law. It would take a long time, so he said no. And so that's the thing is that, well, it's not like no, it can't ever be done, but we could change this law. We could, develop relationships with the Dakota people and saying, you knew this land for 10,000 years, tell us what you know. So, colonization of Turtle Island, I have coffee, if you got 500 years, let's sit down and talk, and we'll cover what happened and try to understand both perspectives. The zeitgeist of what's going on in America, that German word of what went on in the era, all the way from political to social views to education to current events, anything that was happening around that time frame when you're looking at that time frame. What's the zeitgeist of today's time? The cultural beliefs regarding land. Indian people believe you couldn't own land. So when the treaties were all about getting the land. It's a European thought that you come over, if we get wealth through land ownership, through people working for you, there's various reasons why that European concept or value was different than Indian values. You can't own water, you can't own land, you can't own the air. So it was weird thinking when these, early settlers and colonists and politicians go, we want to do a treaty where we get the land. Well, most of the treaties say the right to hunt, fish, and gather to keep our lifestyles going. And that's what the elders talk about. They never talk about owning the land. And so it's just different systems and how they believe in it. And then what happened to the people? Recognition of sovereignty. Now, when the United States they got their independence, they want to be recognized as a country just like other countries. You have to ask other countries. So if you were watching the Olympics last night, you saw all these little countries that broke off. Well, only way they become countries if the rest of the world says, okay, you're a country. Otherwise, they're not, just because you claim you are. So you need permission, more or less, from everybody else. So in the 1778 or 1780s, when we got the permission, they set it on one condition. All the big countries back then go, as long as you recognize the sovereignty of the people who were there before you. And that idea of sovereignty is not something we were given by the U.S. government, it's something we always had. Our own political systems, our own health systems, our own education systems, the right to identify our own membership, how we interact, our values, everything is all within that power of sovereignty. Everybody in this room has sovereignty. The United States as a country, you have Minnesota sovereignty, the county sovereignty, the city. So there's all these different ways of living is under that power of sovereignty. Indian people have their own sovereignty, and that's what has been holding up. Some of the treaties, it dictates what we gave up so that other people have land or access to things. And so our political status is that we are very political. We're a unique group. We're not a minority. African Americans, Asian Americans, Latino Americans, those are minorities. American Indians are not, and that's why we have a standalone center at the St. Cloud State. We have our own building, 3 full-time staff, a couple budgets, because they got the concept of sovereignty and go, oh, they're not a minority, they're political. And this was 25 years ago. Faculty, staff, student, administrators established an Indian Center. And the rest, I have the multicultural student services. Used to be called minority services, now it's nicer. So these are the treaties, and you can see we gave up all of this land. Hundreds of thousands of people were coming, and so this is where the Dakota people moved. In the beginning, it was like maybe 60,000 immigrants, settlers came to Minnesota, and the Indian people go, okay, 60,000, this is a lot of people, I don't know how we can do this. Fast forward 20 years, the number went up to 600,000. Can you imagine if 600,000 immigrants from another country came right here to St. Cloud? So where do we put them all? 600,000 people, that's a lot. We need land, we need resources, we need food, we need jobs. What do we do with these people? And so it's an interesting history to learn this. And so 800 treaties were made between U.S. government and Indian nations. 400 ratified by Congress, 0 were kept. No treaty was kept. You know what they say, rents due, pay up or get out. Think that's gonna happen? So, we kept our side, the US government, in a sense, the citizens of Minnesota didn't. That's why the Minnesota Humanities Center down in St. Paul and the Smithsonian put together Why Treaties Matter. It's all the treaties, and it's been a traveling exhibit for 4 years now, going all the schools and government centers and showing citizens of Minnesota the treaty that your ancestors made, or the people who came before you. So, you still have to honor them. You still have to pay for them. And that payment comes out in other ways. So, American Indians, what do you know? So if I'm teaching you about Dakota land values, how much do you know about Indians? What did you learn? Anything from your parents? Those damn Indians, they're casinos. Well, I don't know what you learned. Maybe you're married to one. Maybe you live next door to one. Maybe you saw movies. You know, what do you know about Indians and where did it come from? Maybe they even teach it in schools. Not much, but they're trying to. In Minnesota, they passed the law, or they passed new standards, education standards, that every teacher, K-12, has to teach Dakota and Ojibwe perspectives in their subject matter. Sometime during the year, talk about it. So, Fayette teacher, I'm going to teach you a game about Dakota Ojibwe play. Music teacher, art teacher, language arts. We're going to read a book by a native author, Dakota Ojibwe author. So we're putting that in so that every child from here forward now learns about the tribes that are here in Minnesota. There's only 2, Dakota and Ojibwe, and there's 11 reservations. So where can you get all this information? At institutions, at MDE, at your schools, because otherwise people are just going to use stereotypes or movies. I learned all about Indians through the Boy Scouts. I hear that all the time. I actually met a group up in Polk County. They're doing a festival. They're Norwegian, and they're tired of churning butter and doing quilts, and so they want Indians. And so they said, Jim, can you bring in some stuff? And I said, okay, what do you want to learn? And so we go, we want a teepee. Well, okay, I can bring that. But it's interesting on what, you know, who is an Indian, where are their communities, what do you want to know, how much do you know? So the Indian population, we can skip over that, but anyway, Minnesota, 85,000 to 90,000 Indians in Minnesota, about 35 to 40,000 in Twin Cities. In our county, our 3-county, Benton's, Sherburne, Stearns, about 300 families, 190 at the St. Cloud School District, 197 at St. Cloud State, 65 at St. Cloud Technical College. So there's Indians here, but they're small numbers. They were almost invisible. When I see another Indian, like at the drive-thru, I follow them. Another one. I go, get out of here, quit stalking me. I want to see another Indian. And so anyway, Minnesota nations, federally recognized, and they're state recognized. So 640 federal recognized Indian nations, 240 something. And the number changes all the time because of political climate and whether they're going to get status or lose status. So it's around about 865 Indian nations in the United States. And so when people come to the American Indian Center and says, Jim, I got to write a paper about Indians. I said, okay, which one? And they go, there's more than one? I said, yeah, 865 of them. Well, pick one. And they go, oh, I don't know. so this is the quiz, and I wanted you guys to work on that because we'll get to the land values. If you want to pass this out with 1 or 2 people and identify the reservations. How many people have been to an Indian reservation? All right, that's a good group. How many people have been to an Indian casino? It's about the same size. Normally, the Indian reservation is not much. The casino's hand goes up. But you can't go to a casino without going on an Indian reservation. And that's another whole presentation and study about gaming, gambling in Minnesota, how that happened, what is allowed and what isn't allowed, enterprise. In the beginning, Indians used to just sell cigarettes alongside the road, and then it was trinkets, and then it was, because the Catholic Church had bingo halls, we could start bingo on the reservation. And then it progressed. As soon as you have gambling in the state get higher or more complicated, so can on the reservation. So when the Powerball came to Minnesota, and I remember a time when we didn't have the Powerball, so that opened the floodgates and the reservations can start gaming. And it's called gaming operations, not gambling. And so that's the thing, is that when Canterbury Downs put in cards, so could the Indian reservations. So everything depends on the state and the citizens. The citizens of Minnesota wanted gaming. And the Indian reservations are where you can do that. Now, there's controversies over how they're allowed to do that. So look at this thing and see where you think the tribes are. Two tribes, Dakota and Ojibwe. I want to get to the Dakota values here, so we got half hour, so we'll go fast through this. And so if you draw a line from Fargo to the Twin Cities, there's a line is the I-94 system. Everything south of I-94 is Dakota. Everything north is Ojibwe, or Chippewa if you prefer the English version, or Anishinaabe if you prefer the native language. So Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Ojibwe, all are talking about the same people. Means human beings, Anishinaabe. First people, there's another definition. The Dakota people, when I worked there at the Shakopee Reservation for 3 years as their education director, 1994 they petitioned the federal government to have their real name back because they were known as the Sioux. The Sioux is a shortened version of an Ojibwe word that means a snake in the grass. So it's a little joke they played on the Dakota people. So in 1994, the Dakota tribe asked the federal government, we want our name back as Dakota, and it means ally. So if you want to impress a Dakota person, call them Dakota. If you call them Sioux, they'll answer. They've been doing it for 400 years. It's in the treaties, it's carved in stone, it's written on old papers. They'll answer the Sioux. You know, impress them if you say Dakota, and if you knew their reservations. Darlene is from here where they paint the trees red, and she, if she was here, would tell you it all in her native tongue. So we have Upper Sioux, number 10. Everybody got that one right? Upper Sioux. And this is where the Dakota conflict was. You go down the river to Lower Sioux. That's in Morton. That will be number 5. Number 9, Shakopee, 20 minutes from downtown Minneapolis. That's in Shakopee, between Shakopee and Prior Lake, the reservation. That's number 9 right there.
Shouldn't we call Upper Sioux Upper Dakota?
No, it's just, yeah, you could, but it's written in stone, Upper Sioux. Just like Cheyenne River Sioux. Now we call them Cheyenne River Dakota. They're part of the Dakota family, the 7 Fires, but the name sticks. So. The Shakopee, Bedewakatan, Dakota community, it used to be Bedewakatan when I worked there. And when I got the job there right away, they sent me to the University of Minnesota to learn about Dakota history. You need to go. I said, but I'm like, you know, they go, are you Indian? I said, well, I'm Anishinaabe. And they go, it's close enough. I said, but I'm only part Indian. I'm part white too. I like being white. So anyway, 7, Prairie Island, nuclear plant. Number 7, we get a lot of electricity, and they store the nuclear waste there. Thank you for doing that. I don't know if their tribe likes it. And it's a swamp, and it's sinking, or it's getting flooded, and they want to move because their land is what, all of this? But they agreed to live there. Now let's move them. But St. Paul's in the way, and Minneapolis is in the way. So Shakopee was 9, 5, Lower Sioux 10. So Mille is the closest one to us, number 6, and right in the middle. Number 2, Fond du Lac, closer to, that's Fond du Lac next to Cloquet, close to Duluth. Duluth had the first casino in the state. Number 3, Grand Portage. It's way up there. Number 1, it's an old reservation. Used to be called Net Lake. Now it's Boys Fort. And number 4, center of the state up north is Leech Lake. And the national or the U.S. government pissed off this tribe even more after, you know, restricting them to that little area. They dropped the national park right in the center. So now it's like a rubber tire all around their reservation because the whole inside is a national park or a U.S. A state park. Right there. Number 8, Red Lake. And Red Lake is interesting because it's the only reservation that's closed. All the other ones in the United States are open reservations. You can come and go. You can go to the trading post. You can stop by the Senior Citizen Center and start sharing coffee and talking and learning more about them. You can go to the schools. You can go to casinos and go to mine. I need some money. And so this is the thing, is that you can visit all the reservations when you want to, except for Red Lake. It's only when they want you to. It's the only one that didn't go by the Public Law 280, where the federal government made the state now responsible or interact with the tribes. And Red Lake was always, I don't know why, it's real detailed on how they didn't have to abide by Public Law 280. And so they can close their reservation if they want. They can put armed guards there. When they had the shooting there about 12 years ago, they only let the FBI in, because they closed down their reservation right away. So it's interesting about Red Lake. It's unique. That reservation is not cut up into farmland. That reservation is owned by all 10,000 members. All the other ones are like landowners. And 11 is White Earth. White Earth is the largest reservation in Minnesota. It was created by Congress back then to put every Indian in Wisconsin and Minnesota on White Earth. So you're looking at people who've been here for 10,000 years and 2,000 years, and their values about interacting with the land, with the water, with the air, with the animals. They're equal. We see us as equal to other animals and plants and stones. And so this degree of acculturation, if you're working with Indian people, you have to understand. This was that standards I talked about. They're going to teach Dakota and Ojibwe in every class, in all those classes. So Darlene, being a member of the Lower Sioux Reservation, there's this nonprofit group of Dakota people who help write the curriculum, and this is that part. A 10-lesson standards-based unit. Includes Dakota youth, adult, elders, with voices to share Dakota perspectives. It meets the social studies standards. Taught the 6th grade students across Minnesota, required social studies curriculum. Learn about and integrating Dakota values of caring for the land as a relative. Environmental teachings and philosophies. Examining Minnesota as a Dakota place. So we're going to skip this because they did 2 years of training. Now you have to contact her for the third cohort. So Minnesota Makoce is our homeland. Minnesota idea, the main idea is that this area is where the Dakota called their homeland, and it was before the boundaries of the state of Minnesota. So it's a huge place. Like I said before, Iowa, Illinois, half of Wisconsin, because the Menominee is over there, and so is the Ho-Chunk, and they fight back and forth on who's the oldest. And then on the other side, North Dakota, South Dakota, up in Canada. So it's a huge place. But it's a land where the waters reflect the sky, or clouds, and cloudy. Makoce means land or place. Many means water, and Sota means clear, but not clear. It's kind of cloudy. And so, according to oral history, the Dakota originated in Minnesota, Makoce. And how do we know this? Is through their oral history, through evidence. When you dig up the land and the ground and see, archaeology of evidence of that, but especially the people. And a lot of textbooks don't put in. They only put so much in our history books and what they teach in school. So we need to talk to elders. We need to hear their voice. We need to hear their experiences. We need to hear it from the people who lived here. Instead of me telling them, I'm from Wisconsin all my life, my family's from Michigan, I'm going to tell you about Minnesota. So it would be really great if we had a Minnesota person here, not me. That's why I had to get permission from Darlene. I said, Darlene, can I talk about your stuff? And she goes, you can try to sell them my program, so I will do the teaching. So that's the thing. What kind of relationship do Dakota people have with Minnesota Makoce? Makoce is just land. So what kind of relationship did they have? I know we put down tobacco every time we take an animal's life, or we pray a lot to the water. We put down tobacco when we pray 3 times a year. So there's always this spiritual and thinking. When we take the life of an animal, we're asking the Creator and then saying our prayers to that spirit of that animal. And so we're going to get to where is your homeland, and what does it mean to be indigenous? I wonder if we have time for that, because those are part of lesson 1. When I teach this to the school children, we ask them, what does it mean to be indigenous? What are indigenous animals to Minnesota? And so is the bear, and they just say yes or no. Is the bear indigenous here? Sure. Timber wolf? Sure. Mountain lion? Yeah. It was mountain lions all over. Possum? No. Possum, no. Skunk?
Yes.
Yes, skunk is a really big, powerful medicine in Ottawa culture. Giraffe, and then there you go, that's really easy, no. And then pheasant? No, that was brought here too. And so you can go through that, and as we go through all the animals, you can go through plants too, but I don't know plants that well. Or the fish, you know, that flying one that hits you in the head. Or all those other kind of things that are attaching to boats. Those are things that are not indigenous here. And what happens when you bring in indigenous animals or plants, that what happens to the people or the things that were here. And they either adjust, get, you know, forced out, not enough light, depending on the plants. And so then, of course, we move into people. Who is indigenous here? And so the students try to identify where they came from. So what is your homeland? What nation did you come from, or your ancestors? Somebody goes, I came from Madison, Wisconsin. I don't know. You know, and so I've always been here, as you remember, but you know, what's indigenous here? And so this is a good activity to do in that first chapter, just to see the homeland and how long they've been interacting. And then citizen and sovereignty. What does it mean to be a citizen of the United States? What does it mean to be a citizen of the Dakota Nation? What do you get with the treaties and what don't you get? And do you have a treaty? Just because you're Indian doesn't mean you have a treaty, because they stopped making treaties because Congress says we can't afford it. And so there's a time frame where we stopped. And so this is a look at Minnesota Makoce, and you can see the connection between what is now Wisconsin and Minnesota, but their homeland went all over the place, and it was reflecting. And they understand this concept of their worldview was huge, and it's the reflection of the sky in the water. Line of sky blue water. Isn't that a beer commercial?
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the thing, is that how did they know this? How could they go up high enough to see this whole area? They didn't have planes back then. Didn't have mountains high enough in the Midwest to see that. Some Dakota and Lakota people believe they came from the stars. So that's another conversation. So we're all related. And so this is the concept we need to have to understand. And I wanted you to at least hear one of these. I wonder if we have value. That's what I was afraid of. You should be. I don't think I can get any higher.
You have to do the one on the movie too.
Okay. Yeah, it's up. Oh, is there a volume on that? So, Makoce Owasin. Makoce Owasin is we are all related. And Darlene got together a bunch of Dakota elders to explain what that means. Because if you come from that land value, that we're related to the land. We're related, we come from the earth because some of the Dakota creation stories is the creator fashioned man out of earth and then made the Dakota Nation. I can't tell the whole story because you'll need a Dakota elder to do that, but basically they had help from the wind and help from the water. Mother Earth opened up and the Creator, grabbed some mud and made the Dakota people. And so anyway, we've been connected to the animals and to the air and to the trees all the time. And this is their belief. And you're going back 10,000 years where they still believe that. And they talk about we're all connected to everybody in this room. In some form or manner, because you all came to this, presentation, we're now connected in a small way, but we go, oh yeah, I heard him, he's nuts. But the thing is, we're connected. I breathe out the same air you're breathing in, and that microbiology level that's now putting what makes me in you and your force into them and then and them. And so it's real interesting. On Facebook just last week, they had a scientist explaining that 7% of us is expelled in like a 24-hour cycle, and we pick up 7% of someone else, and it becomes part of our bodies. And then you talk about the environment, and we talk about the air and the quality of environment we live in, and how the food we eat and the animals we interact, and all this interchanging of molecules happens. And that's what this concept is. We're all related. We just need scientists to tell us that it's right. Or just ask the elders. And so hopefully, there's got to be another.
I bet the sound system underneath there probably has to be turned on.
Oh. Yeah, you would think. Anyway, I'll play and see if we can be a little quiet. Oh yeah, there you go. Perfect. Somebody's smart.
Or lucky.
For me, I think the commonly used definition of that means that we're all related, and that's how most people recognize and use that. And it's used, from my experience, in our ceremonies and with prayer, and that's how I understand it to be.
So for me, it's just trying to be a good neighbor, trying to be a good relative, and that can help you connect to everything that's important. Whether it's water or whatnot. I just try to be a good neighbor, a good relative, and I think for me that I try to expand on that every year.
What I understand about Mitapio Owasi is that I guess the literal translation of it is that we're all related, or you address people as your relative, even though you might not be blood related. So that you treat people with respect because they're your relative, but really, to my way of understanding, it goes much further than that. It goes to that respect of all creation.
We're very connected to the land, and so that's an important part of being related. You have to recognize that the Makoce, the land, provides for you everything that you have, your clothing, your pens and pencils, your skateboards, everything that you have comes from the earth. And so all of those elements, the water, the things that we eat, the things that your mother or your grandmothers or friends of yours who have beautiful gardens. In some of those gardens are medicines, natural medicines.
When you say mitake oasi, when you say oasi, that's where all the plants and the birds and anything in this world, that's what they're included in there. That's what that means. And we know that all these things are created by the Creator, and they all have they're all alive, and we're relatives, all living things. We give thanks.
It says, man belongs to the earth, earth does not belong to man.
So what does that mean to you? Why did you select that?
Well, because lately all the government's getting greedy with the land, and Sitting Bull's my favorite cheese, and that's who said it. Okay. And when people get greedy with Makoce and just take from her, and they're killing her off, and she's all we have.
So for me, that we're all related, that it's all related, has been a theme throughout my life. And I constantly find that it's like this path that is interconnected. And that it's only, I guess, I don't know if it's a conspiracy theory, but that we all come from someplace and that we all have a story, and to honor that story. And that in so many ways we are more alike than we are different. But to be a true Dakota is to be a good relative. And that means to everything, like he had said, to the land, to the water, to the four-leggeds, to the winged animals, to be a good relative.
So it's a very broad term, but it has so many, components to it. And I think that in using that, you'll then begin to understand what it means to be related to everyone and to everything.
So, I wonder if it's going to keep playing. I want to make sure I shut it off. But Dakota people aren't the only people that have that value. I mean, you can look at any religion or any group of people, and that value is everywhere. This is just what we're saying. We didn't come up with it. It's what they believe, and they've been doing it for thousands of years. But it's what they tried to live by. So last night when I saw North and South Korea come in as one group, I go, oh, they get it. They got that concept that we're all related, and let's just work together. And to be a Dakota is to be a good relative. And so that's not just with the land and not just with the animals, but it's with other people. And so when we have new people come to Minnesota Makoce, we're going to be their good relative. And that's the Dakota way. And in Anishinaabe, it's almost the same way too. We have similar values, but just in our own language. So, one more. I think that the Dakota values, I put it on the back of that sheet that you have. The answers to the reservations are also on the back. And these values, like I said, it doesn't belong entirely just to Dakota people. It's just what they believe in. And if Darlene was here, she would be able to pronounce all these words in Dakota. It's a totally different than an Anishinaabe language. Makademash Kikiwabu is our word for coffee, and it's given to us by the French, and it's a double vowel language written down. Ours was always oral. Dakota is more of a guttural language. In our Algonquin language, we share it with the Cheyenne and Anishinaabe and the Iroquois, and you can see pockets of it all across North America. And Dakota is totally different. So it's like two countries living next to each other, speaking different languages, having different values, different experiences, interact with the land in their own way, doing their own ceremonies, but we share a same water here in Minnesota. And so that's the thing, is that we have a lot of similarities and we have a lot of differences, but we also have a lot of experiences that we all shared from newcomers coming in. So anyway, these Dakota values, who wouldn't want those values? You probably have them in your own belief system, or in your own religion, or your own values. And so on there, I did put the majority, some of the values, for collaboration versus competition, You know, if sometimes teachers need to know that, why are the Dakota people not answering? Why aren't they raising their hand? Because they don't want to embarrass any of their other Dakota friends. Other kids are trained to put their hands up right away. I know the answer, all fighting for that top score, where Dakota people are happy and everybody has the same score. So there's different approaches to some of these values and what we are looking for. Time, Indian time is a big value that's totally different than time concept out in Western society. And so that's why those values I shared with you. So these are just additional resources. I'm supposed to leave time at the end for questions. No one can possibly know all 800 tribes. I know a little bit about Dakota, a little bit about Anishinaabe after working with them for 30 years, and hardly nothing about my own tribe, Ottawa, because I didn't get home and get enrolled until I was 40. So they brought me home, and it was a place I've never been. All the people looked like my cousins and my mom, and I was on a language camp there for a week where they only spoke Ottawa. Go to their powwows. I met the spiritual leader, did ceremonies, but I know very, very little. So there's 800 cultures in America. 600 are American Indian. The rest is everybody else in the room. So the diversity in our group, which is the smallest, is huge. Diversity of thought, diversity of custom, diversity of language, diversity of life experiences. So there's a huge diversity of American Indian nations. So there's no one Indian way. There's no one Hispanic way. There's no one Latino way. There's no one African American way. There's no one Norwegian way. There's no one. So you can put any culture in there. There's so much diversity in all our cultures. So there's 4.2 million Indians in the United States, 4.2 million ways of being American Indian. So any questions you might have? Yes?
Are you familiar with Warren's History of the Ojibwe?
Warren?
Warren's History of the Ojibwe. He was lived up at Crow Wing, up by Brainerd, and went around to all the people at that time and got their stories. And if you read that, that has a lot more to do with this particular area than any other book that I've ever read on it. And of course, they talk about the Dakota living in earth lodges at Mille Lake. That was kind of their home at one time. And then the Ojibwe, when they got the guns from the French, they drove them out on the prairies and they had to take up teepees and that sort of thing. And so things have changed drastically. And of course, I grew up in Long Prairie, where the Winnebago Agency was to keep those two from fighting. Otherwise, they were killing one another also on it. And you were talking about translation of words. Just one little thing there. A lot of the Indian words really are beautiful. And if you have a Winnebago camper or a Winnebago boat or something like that, that means dirty water people. So that's...
in Wisconsin, I worked with the Ho-Chunk, and they were called Winnebago until they took their real name back, Ho-Chunk. And so the Ho-Chunk Nation was forced or removed to Wisconsin and Nebraska. And they argue, because they have a reunion all the time, which one is their real home. They said, come home, come home. And so before we go too far, that is a movement in Minnesota. The Minnesota Humanities Society is doing Absent Voices. You need people like the author you're talking about to tell their story.
Right.
Not me telling their story.
Just one more question, and that is, the Dakota claim the Black Hills all the time, and they were put there temporarily, and now they consider it their homeland. Why is that?
I'm not an expert on that, but I know it's the Lakota, not Dakota. But when I got the job at Shakopee, they considered Dakota in Shakopee the mother tribe. And Nakota and Lakota are out branches of their 7 councils. And so the Lakota creation story is they came out of the Black Hills. They came from the underground to populate the earth. So the Black Hills belong to the Lakota, and the U.S. government paid them, but they never took the money.
Okay, all right.
It's in a bank account. They refuse to take the money. They want the land. They don't want the money.
Yep. But anyway, I think if everybody looks up Warren's History of the Ojibwe, it will tell a lot of stories in this particular area, in the Long Prairie area, and so on. So get into
That's
that.
fine. Any other questions? Oh,
Are there any language classes, would you the language classes at St. Constance?
no, we used to have a language class, but it was only level 1 and that person moved on. And all he did was listen to the tapes and repeat what he said. And so we wised up a little bit, and so we now televise language classes from Fond du Lac Tribal College. And if any student wanted, they take it on distance ed. But there's language tables in Minneapolis, and we had a language table at the AIC, but the person graduated on our campus. Language is being taught or being brought back by tribal people, both Dakota and Ojibwe.
So I spent some time on the Fond du Lac reservation, a short time, and their opinion of how their relationship to the earth is very water oriented and very, because they came here looking for the food that grows on water. Is that different than the Dakota? Are they as attached to the wild rice? Is that a big part of their relationship?
Well, just like that man said, is that the Dakota lived up on the Mille Lake.
Mhm.
So Mille is the mystic lake that Dakota talks about in their culture and in their values and their history. So Dakota had all of Minnesota, so they did ricing. And so most people think that's an Ojibwe cooking thing or gathering thing, and no, Dakota people did it too.
But their religion almost is kind of wild ricey too. I mean, I can't speak for them.
They don't. I know of Native American church. That's the kind of religion. That's Christianity and American Indian spirituality. But my understanding, there's no such thing as American Indian religion. But their spiritual practices are individual and group, and there's ceremonies that they do together. But we're thankful for all kinds of wild or food. All the plants, the moons. When you understand the moons, the strawberry moon. The moon of the snapping branches in Ottawa. The moon tells us which month and what kind of plants to do or activities from planting to harvesting. And the moon is what dictates our seasons on Earth. And so that's why the moon became very center thing for Indian belief systems. And so I don't know if it's a religion, but it's all connected because we pray and we have certain values about the moon and the stars, and some of that's at my table downstairs, and then how we are all related, we interact with that. So I can't give you details about the difference between Fond du Lac and Dakota values and what one values water more than the other, because there's a lot of creation stories about water being involved, because water was first tried to create man. The Creator used water to open Mother Earth, and it couldn't do it. And so they brought in the wind, and the wind and water helped create man. So it's been connected ever since the beginning. But you're not supposed to know that story. What about? Oh, it's in Manistee. You have to go to Manitowoc, Wisconsin, take the ferry across 4 hours, and then you land at Ludington. You go north 30 minutes, and there's my reservation. We are fish people, so we have fishing charters, and so you heard of like dances with wolves. Well, we dance with fish. And so that's the thing. That's what's popular in our culture. It's a fishing village most of the time until we got our reservation back. We all lived in town. Only 3 people lived on our reservation in 1994. And then when I got enrolled, more people started moving because the jobs were in town. They weren't on the reservation. And so anyway, we have people ask, do you live in teepees? Do you live in huts and lodges? I said, well, no, we live in houses, just like everybody else. Any other questions? You wouldn't believe that question comes up. People come into the American Indian Center and you go, Jim, do Indians celebrate Christmas? I said, the Christian ones do, because we were Christianized. Not everybody's traditional. And that's the thing, is you have to understand all that when you see current day reservations. We're trying to be business-like. We're trying to be successful in two nations, off the reservation, on the reservation. We're learning. We need doctors, lawyers, social workers. We need engineers. We need all that too. And our people value education, so we send them off the reservation to get this education. But we also try to teach them culture and value in their own history.
One last question. Can
Sure.
you tell me what that bill is?
It's a bitter pill.